Okay.
Hey, Bob.
Greetings. Hi.
Hey,
Had a bit
Bob.
of trouble getting in, but here we are. No
Oh,
problem.
no. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. We're just gathering slowly. We're up to about 20 people. People join in and around this period of time as well. So, yeah,
Terrific.
Bob sent me an email saying that there was something wrong with the link, which then caused me to panic the other day. Or no, this morning. It feels like it the other day. And then I checked it out. I thought, oh, okay, it's fine. And then he was having trouble with it. But here we are.
Well,
with
it
his
just
own.
said that it said there was a meeting in progress. That's all. But I guess I have to be part of an exclusive group to be admitted entry to that one.
You do. Look at, like, on my screen, you're right beside Martin Waxman. So that's the most exclusive group we can get, I guess. Martin usually does the stand-up beforehand. He kind of does the
I would say
opening
so.
for everybody.
Well, actually, Devin did the warm-up, and because my material's just gone stale, as everyone knows.
Yeah. Well, we're really happy that you're here and join us today, Bob. For those that know Bob, you know that he's had a long career at senior levels in the consulting world in the United States, Canada, Asia. He's led some of the big agencies and their offices throughout the world. He's had some experience in politics, and his focus right now in his new company Signal is really what I would call a focused executive boutique communications offering, working with senior leaders in organizations to help them and their staff work on executing messages and communication strategies. So Bob was somebody that I've been wanting to have on for a period of time. We have people that are reaching out to us, so that's nice that it's grown in desire. And so what I thought we would do is just open the floor to you, Bob, and share with us what you think are the challenges within leadership communications, executive communications in these very challenging times, and really think about where the field really is being asked to move as a result of these issues as well. So over to you.
Thank you, Terry. I'm genuinely thrilled to be here. As you know, I've been focusing on this area in kind of a monomaniacal way. I feel like the person who's got that one key on the piano they keep hitting over and over again, or the broken record on leadership communication. And it was kind of an obscure fringe or niche area of consulting when I first got into it. I was focused on how leaders use social media to communicate or to signal their leadership, so to speak. So now, of course, with COVID-19, we've seen this concept take center stage. And I believe that the leader's role in communication has just gone off the scale in terms of its importance. But before I go any further, I just want to let all of you know that which you already realize, how fortunate you are to have someone as distinguished and illustrious as Terry to be your convener and educator here. I was overseas for 20 years, watched him from afar, and we never really got to know each other or met each other until just, I think it was a couple of years ago. We had a drink in the west end of the city. So I feel really pleased that we finally made a connection with you and your community. Lots of amazing names here in the screen. In coming up with the title for this talk today, Terry and I, in an iterative fashion, came up with this one. There is this leadership communication imperative at a time when, well, going into coronavirus, we had digital disruption. We also see now that there's a lot of social disruption going on. Algorithm divided societies, extreme polarities, massive gaps between rich and poor. And the economic disruption is now upon us in a way that we're about to find out may hold all kinds of different lessons for communicators everywhere. Now, I did this PRCA talk last week. They asked me to describe, as a precursor to a similar presentation, what are the forces of change right now in global public relations. And these are some of my favorite ones, which, because of our format today, I'm not going to get into individually. But I would have to tell you, I've never seen more of a ferment, more of a dynamic time in our field of endeavor there are so many factors simultaneously changing and reshaping and bringing just a constant flux to our industry. The one I don't have on this list here is leadership communication. That's going to be our focus today, but I did have new normal on that list. I noticed a tendency recently in society, in the media, a mirror of society, that everyone's talking about this new normal. So there's an AI firm in London called Signal. It's another Signal, not the same one as mine, although I have a relationship with the owner of that company. This is a global media scan they did of headlines and summaries of the last few months. And the expression new normal or new reality is indeed going through the roof. It is very much a zeitgeist idea. And so I put this up at the beginning of the talk simply because I want to make it clear to everybody. My thesis is, I believe just about everything in our craft is changing right now. And I think there's a new normal or new abnormal or new constantly changing thing that's happening in our industry. You know, I gave a speech to a meltwater conference a few months ago in Ottawa. I looked at that deck for some slides today. A lot of what I was talking about then is obsolete, out of date, stale. That was just a few months ago. I think we see in the PR industry a lot of practitioners who are kind of stuck in yesteryear, practicing holding statement PR mired in the 1990s. So I think whatever we knew last year, we have this new normal and we need to re-educate ourselves and keep ourselves current. So this leadership communication being the rage or all the rage, I think is one of the new normal things right now. And there was a great piece in the New York Times yesterday. I pulled this quote out of it. It said, leaders have a powerful force on their side, human psychology. Support for leaders is increasing almost universally across the board. Now, many of us have been pundits online about the leaders who are performing more effectively, in our view, as communicators right now. But in general, it's true that leaders have enjoyed an uptick. I find the most interesting one locally here, Doug Ford, because while he has performed better than we have known him to perform, I think a lot of the perception of his performance is actually kind of overrated. But we'll get into that later. I also, with my friends at Signal in London, I asked them to do, and this is Anglosphere countries, everything from Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, through to UK, Canada, etc., USA. I asked them to do a search on leadership and communication, and also the word crisis. And what we have found is that the global crisis of the coronavirus has put through the roof the idea that leadership communication is important. There's a greater salience for the concept than ever before. More than a 300 billion reach in terms of how many times this has been mentioned in articles around the world. Now, this is good news, and this is a book plug. There's a really great guy in the UK, Damien Corbett. He's just written a book as the editor called The Social CEO. It's available, well, it was available as of January here, just before the coronavirus started to become well known. How social media can make you a stronger leader. And I wrote a chapter in that book. It was the PR chapter, basically, on how PR disasters on social are driving CEOs to embrace their own personal use as executive communicators of social media. So I would encourage those of you interested in this segment to consider looking at that book. And I've got some extra copies if any of you are interested. I think maybe I'll give one to Terry just for free, and I'll even sign it at the beginning on Damien's behalf. Now, I asked my friend, Nick Nanos, who I believe has also been one of your speakers in the past, Terry, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I can't hear you.
Yes, Nick has spoke to one of our residencies a year. Well, it was the same time, I think, Martin, that you defended around that same time.
Yeah. Well, Nick is a wonderful fellow, and he's an old school chum of mine from Queen's University days. And I asked him, Nick to do a poll, and we Canadians, the rank and file public, we asked what is the for C companies to use social media to communicate with the public? This is back in January, just before coronavirus became well known. And we found, and this is a record number because we've asked this question before, roughly half of Canadians now feel it's important for CEOs of leading companies to use social media in general to communicate with the public. It hasn't been that high before. We're doing this poll again very shortly. I expect we're going to find it's gone up even higher. I would say in general, it's not just social media that leaders have to deal with. I would say social everything is soaring right now. The social capital and the value of social capital and the use of social and communications mechanisms to build the value of social capital. Social communities, of course, social distancing is part of the vocabulary. Social programs, we're getting sort of 1930s acronyms now, not WPA or various works acronyms like we had in the US here. It's, what is it, CERB, and these various other ones are part of the vocabulary now. Social purpose, never more important. Brands taking stands that are socially eligibility, and of course social sentiment gauged through various mechanisms. But I also think socialism, I'm not a socialist, but I think there's no question that we may be looking at a reordering of society soon. Things have profoundly changed, and leaders are going to have to, especially when the feds aren't able to give everyone $2,000 a month if they don't have a job. There could be some real changes ahead. I would say that of these socials, though, I'm just sticking to our knitting here, social media has massively increased what I would call the quantity and the quality, or the other social media like Twitter and Facebook are major contributors or minor contributors, or not at all contributors to PR disasters for companies. A majority of Canadians say social media is a major contributor to PR disasters. Now, that may not be surprising, but we have some evidence of this. For executive communication, because leaders have to deal with those PR disasters. No, I like this question. Many of you on the call for your consulting work or future endeavors after your studies will enjoy this concept here, that the public, even the general public, they believe, 3 out of 4 Canadians believe that PR compared to 10 years ago is more important than it was because of the advent, the rise of social media. Now, have our budgets risen in lockstep? I mean, has our function, has our value, has the power of what we do, has it commanded the resources that it should in light of this? Not yet, but we're working on it. Now, it's the centenary of as a management kind of a vocabulary that you use around it that looks very sort of C-suite friendly. This is the kind of talk that I think would sell well with very senior executives. It's 100 years old, but we should remind ourselves that what we're describing in terms of public forward version, but actually we could link it to what should be a management function, but that goes down a tangent that I mean, I wanted to raise that, but I don't want to get into it at the moment. Now, the so-called right way to deal with PR disasters or fast-moving crisis communication situations, it really has changed. I started PR in 1990 at Hill & Knowlton in Toronto, and what we knew then is not what we should be doing now. And I hope you don't mind, Terry. I borrowed your purple color to show my alignment with your son's design direction, which is superb. And I see he's on the call. So hello, Devin. Now, what usually happens in a crisis situation? Companies will usually try to explain things with an initial statement using sort of a corporate that's carefully parsed by legal counsel. This looks kind of, too perfect or plastic, and it often falls flat. There's no person attached to it. It's just sort of the company. So what happens often if it's, loss of life or some horrible harm is involved, outrage online communities, they still, if there's some kind of corporate stonewalling at first, the CEO, and this is relevant to the rise of leadership communication, is ultimately almost always forced de rigueur to come out and say sorted apology or an induced apology, where the public presses the CEO to do that. Now, the public doesn't just expect to hear an explanation from the CEO. They really are demanding it. So I would have to say to you that whereas in the past, crisis comms handling could have been rather risk averse, rather safe, minimizing risk, and frankly, I think rather cowardly leadership communication. And I think a lot of these so-called PR disasters that we see today, whether or not the corporate PR function is what's actually disastrous about the situation, I think it comes down to a failure of leadership communication, failure to attach more importance to the function than it deserves versus compliance concerns, failure to heed the counsel of corporate communicating. For CEOs, well, maybe it's our failure if we're proximate to a CEO for not persuading she or him about this, that they don't all too often grasp the massive power of their own personal communication, especially directly on social, to shape successful PR outcomes. Now, here's Nick again. 2 years ago, 1,000 Canadians, we asked when a company has a crisis and something major goes wrong, are the following factors, are the following important or unimportant as things to do to communicate about a problem that goes wrong. So anyway, it boils down to this. 6 out of 10 Canadians feel that it's important for CEOs to use social media to directly communicate with the public. When it comes to Canadians, roughly half expect CEOs to communicate on social in general, every day. 2/3 roughly want the CEO for sure to communicate directly on social when there's a specific crisis. So I also had Nick do this poll. What's the best way for a troubled organization to respond? The public believes, 70% of them do, that the company should acknowledge and communicate. Only a quarter feel a company could acknowledge a problem and not communicate. Nobody thinks at this point. When something goes wrong, all as never before. Now it's right. The earthquake interview showing her unflappable nature, the latest in a long series of wonderful communication moments with the New Zealand Prime Minister. But we have other kinds of leaders here, don't we? We have more of a, I think it's an interesting gender discussion. Again, a tangent we don't have time for today, but we have, on the populist side of things, we have this sort of He-Man, devil-may-care, hyper-masculine way of communicating. Trump, for example, maybe Johnson in the UK to a certain extent, or the Turkish would-be dictator, for example. So there's a sort of a demagogic type of leader who some people admire because, they tell it like it is, even though they do disturbing things like attack people and harm reputations in a grievous manner. Of course, this is the greatest ironic case of all, the Cambridge Analytica situation. Do you remember, this is only a couple of years ago, Zuckerberg took forever to come out and say anything about Cambridge Analytica, and when he did, it was in text. He didn't say anything on camera.
He's refused to testify, especially in the UK.
Yeah. So as Dan Edelman used to, this was one of Dan's favorite expressions, not fast enough. He didn't come out and say something quickly, but finally the public on social, their anger forces a TV interview, which I did not find persuasive, but it did sort of get him off the hook, and it got the public off his back for a little while. And this was just a massive thing on the front porch. It was everywhere. But then, of course, we see whenever this predictable cycle that I've described, it repeats itself. The public spectacle is invariably labeled a PR disaster. Failed to get ahead of it all. Look at Boeing. And Boeing, Boeing uses Edelman. They spend a vast amount of money on that agency, which is, obviously one of the finest in the world. But even here, the CEO community more important to him than the life of the Asians and the Africans affected in those 737 MAX crashes. So he did not communicate and emote in the moment as he should have. So I would have to say, and I suppose this is my thesis, this is the main point I would like you to remember today, if you will. Organizations now have to be capable of communicating continuously with real-time leadership in the present moment of the now, striking at all times the right emotional chord. That's the key. And that, my friends, is not an easy thing to do for anybody, including communicators. A lot of organizations, especially industrial concerns or traditional hierarchies, they are asynchronous interval communicators. There's a time and a place. There's a press conference that's scheduled, or here's these are our quarterly earnings. We know what's going to happen when it's going to happen. But now, we're heading into this polychronic world, which I think is partly driven by cultural imperatives that social media can kind of unlock globally, where all kinds of things happen at the same time. And things are more sort of fluid or chaotic than they were. And, a leader coming out and communicating the coronavirus, that's very difficult. Because in big countries even, it's hard for a leader to capture what people are feeling right now, because the feeling's different in Saskatchewan than it is from Nova Scotia, and it sure as hell different in Singapore, South Korea, China, Russia, you name it. Anyway, this is a map of the monochronic world that we have been part of in the PR world. Blue is the traditional PR world, and red is, I would say, the emerging PR world in terms of how time works and in terms of how PR works. As you know, the news cycle is different now. It's not that gentle curve that it was. It's more of a sudden, radical, shocking spike. The right-hand image is from Facebook Labs, and then like a sugar buzz or an injectable illegal substance, then you get the crash, and it just plummets down to nothing again. So the bad news is the leader has to deal with a real intense pylon. The good news is there's no public memory anymore. For those of you who watch this show on Sunday, shock cycles are news cycles are out, shock cycles are in. I think that puts it well. And just partly to irritate Terry, I want to talk about Trump for a little while.
I might have to shave my beard off.
Look, I share Terry's views on Trump. But you know what? He was when the Trump International. I was with others. I organized lots of media for Trump. I spent the day with him, and at that time, I thought, wow, this guy is a master of publicity. He was at that time even sort of the man from the 1980s. Man style journalism. He had this ability to attract attention through contrast between different opposing parties. And I found it fascinating. Of course, what's happened to him is, I mean, he was a much different fellow, at least the one I thought I knew from that day together. He's become a much different person in public. I don't know if that matches what he is in private now or not. It would alarm me if that is so. It seems like it is so. President, many of you may have seen this interview on 60 Minutes after he was elected with Leslie Stoll, when he said, social media has more power than money. It's a modern form of communication. And he has always done. You know, deflection, gaslighting, controversial hand grenades, with, you know, lighting fuses, ticking bombs, and all the rest of it. But a lot of leaders, you know, say what you will about Trump. A lot of executives I knew at the time, they didn't want to be like Trump. They were horrified by this. They didn't want to be like him at all. But they finally, executives did, they felt the power of social for the very first time. And I feel the one thing about Trump is that for the first time, I think a lot of CEOs believe that the risk of being absent on social, especially if they are attacked, it seemed to be greater than the risk of being present there and making a mistake in the first place. I think there's been a real tipping point there. I do expect a real-time communication thing as well. A couple of more nanos things here. I'm going to conclude the presentation within not too long, just a few more minutes. Nanos found out that 2 in 3 Canadians say that it's important for CEOs to use social media to share updates, things that are going on, specifics, facts, and tangibles about a crisis. Nanos also asked, though, whether Canadians feel like it's important or not for CEOs to use social media to explain how he or she feels about a problem. Well, you know what? That may be what Canadians say, you know, more than half say it's not that important. But I think, you know, experience would seem to suggest it's different than that. Look at, you know, here's their nicely kind of framed, you know, we take these matters seriously, we apologize, you know, crisis holding statement here. But it wasn't enough. The public was outraged and they wanted more. They forced Kevin Johnson, the CEO of Starbucks, onto television. Now, here's another credit. You know, and this was part of the Edelman team's activity. They turned on a dime. It could have been a PR disaster, but they put the CEO out. They put him on TV. He was very emotional, for those of you who remember that. And what was the PR legacy in terms of tactic, or, well, actually strategy in this case? Johnson, who had not been on Twitter, joined just after this incident on September 2018. More and more CEOs getting out there to signal their leadership online. Now, I'm already running over my time, so I'm going to just say to you, I'm going to send you a PDF link on some of these.
Right.
But you know, I saw this last night. You know, we take these matters very seriously, from Franklin Templeton. And I want to close. Let me find, yeah, here's the slide I want to close on. Look, I think a lot of what we have taken as givens, or the received wisdom, conventional wisdom of PR, what we used to do is no longer working like it used to be. Plastic messaging and catchphrase stuff, that's out. It's more what companies do as opposed to what they say. Real people with actual flaws, who even talk about those flaws in a vulnerable way, they are the ones who do well. People and companies who are too perfect, they breed resentment, and people, they attack. And I think the key to success is to let leaders be themselves at their best. Now, I borrowed that from the infamous Roger Ailes, the Fox News guy, wrote a book in the 1980s. You Are the Message, I think it was called. Now, I find him repellent, actually, but I think he's right about this. It's not about sort of coming up with some fake image. The strategy should be, you know, build a plan. That's what I think the name of the game should be. So I'll just stop on that, Terry, if that's a good time to do so.
That's great. Maybe you can just stop sharing. We'll go from there and get your face a little bigger on the screen.
Okay.
I think Bob, you raise a number of important issues, and we've had a couple questions in the discussion chat line that I want to go to, but I think leaders being themselves, most of the people that have attained that position haven't had the opportunity to be themselves, right? They've lived in very confined, contrite, very manufactured, even educational perspectives. If you look at where most of them are coming from, MBA programs, that they've had to fit within this model, right? Or mold. So I guess the key for us would be, how do you get to them? How do you build that trust? How do you show them that the risks are not as bad as they think they are, and that this too can help build not only their capital but the organizational capital as well.
Well, look, a lot of leaders who, if they were to act just like themselves, people would like what they see, right? A lot of people, and this, a lot of people who end up in the number one job may or may not be the most admirable person around, right? You learn that when you get older and you've been in an organization for a long time. And maybe this expectation that we have now means that the kind of person who becomes the leader could change for the better in the future. I would hope so. But I think, frankly, this is blunt, I think fear is the key, Terry.
Maybe, Bob, maybe you want to do that
in a
again.
more positive way with some.
Yeah.
What happened?
You're just free. You've had some issues with connectivity over it, but it sort of catches up. So you froze. That the secret is, and we're all sitting there with bated breath.
Well, I would say fear.
Again, this is amazing.
Fear is the key, Terry. Fear is the key. It happened again?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But fear is the key.
I'm going to just, I'm just going to do something here to see if we can't improve our bandwidth situation. Is this happening a lot, Terry?
It's been constant.
Okay, I've just I've just switched to another I'm sorry about that. I don't know if it's at this end or what, but look, I think if I look at anything that's driven executive adoption of these sorts of approaches, or they're showing them how somebody's really ruined
Bob, it seems to be actually
or
worse.
Showing how because really,
yeah,
okay, I don't know why. One moment. Hello?
Yeah.
Am I back? Hello?
You're there now.
Am I back now?
Yeah. But it's very spotty.
Can you see me, hear me?
Maybe if everybody turns off their video,
going
that
on
might help.
here that would explain that.
Yeah. So if everybody goes off video, that might help, except for Bob and I. I think we've done that. Okay, so we are just you and me now.
Terry, I can see you.
Yep. Okay, you can see me. I'm just trying to get.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
Do we still have that signal difficulty? I can always reset my router to see if that's the problem.
No. Well, I think we're okay for now. But I think the key is this notion of fear, right? Getting them or reducing the level of fear that they would have about these kind of enterprises of communications. One of the other questions that somebody was curious about, because you kind of teased at it at the beginning, was, so why do you think Doug Ford about his performance that it might be overrated?
Well, I mean, he comes out and he will read his daily communication. The prime minister does that too. It's mostly reading. So I think he hasn't made a blunder. He hasn't. I mean, when you think of where does Doug Ford usually make his mistakes, it's when he's extemporaneous. But it's been highly controlled. People around Ontario have, they haven't hoped that he would fail in his role as the leader. They would hope that he should succeed. So I think the absence of mistakes and his coming out and communicating as he has, absent sort of the wild or undisciplined loose cannon stuff, I think that's got across really well. But I don't hear anything that inspiring from him. And I think we're already starting to see recently that we're starting to get. There's been a little bit of freelancing with his messaging around the testing, for example. Right. And I think we're starting to see what we used to see again. But I think also you'll notice that he's surrounded by very reassuring people when he does that communication. Christine Elliott, Rod Phillips, the more moderate, competent people who have positive reputations and who people secretly hope are prevailing on him to do things as they may recommend because of his more the team that they've emphasized has really helped him. He's also been good at the photo ops, right. Whereas they were bad at the photo ops before. The pictures of Ford. I mean, I find, I think the one with him carrying the boxes or the baking, the whatever. I mean, that was good stuff. So they've done the image work really well, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I think people in Ontario want him to do well. I think because they want all of us to do well. So I think that they want their leaders to be true leaders at this point in time. And I think you're right. I think there are some moments, glimmers of Doug, the attack Doug beforehand that is lying latent. And I think the people like Rod and Christine are doing a very good job of being able to keep them on message. I think where we go from here, the simple, this contrast of being transparent, being very open, making sure that we get all the messaging out in a perfect way is contrasted with, the reports on the weekend about him not allowing the ministerial, letters to be made public, which seemed to be bizarre.
Yeah.
So I think there's those issues. Martin had a really good point that was on. He said, do you think the move to socialism will supplant the trend toward populism that we've seen? How do you think that will affect us in Canada?
Well, I think we look at
frozen there again.
One populist coin in the. I'm not being heard properly.
No, just try again.
Okay. I think we have to look at populism as two sides of a coin, right? I mean, we have the sort of the corporate racist populism of Trump, and on the other side of that coin, we have the Sanders populist approach. So, is this a coherent? I mean, is populism a way to rally a mass constituency of people around media and political elites haven't traditionally espoused on their own? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think there are different kinds of populism here, and we'll find out whether or not the left can do the same as the right has been doing. Mm-hmm. I also look at France. I mean, France has had a Mélenchon. He was the rightest popular socialist to be populist. In fact, I think there's a populist socialists are the ones who embrace a certain populist way of communicating. So that's how I would, I'm not sure where that's going to head. I do think that the Johnsons, the Trumps, I mean, I haven't gotten into it verbally with this presentation, but it turns out that people want competent leaders when they're faced with actual danger. When times are good and there's not a worry and the stock market is trading at an all-time record, okay, whatever, we'll be entertained. But now that, our family, our children, our whole way of life may be hanging in the balance, we want people who know what they're doing, occupying these positions of power. And so that's why I think it's been interesting. I mean, I think I tweeted recently, I've never seen a time in my life where simultaneously, in my mind, populists like Trump, public health authority. So I hope that we'll see less of the entertainers and more of the competent leaders, particularly in politics.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning as well. This, the need for, or the reliance on the professional class of leadership at this period of time, that people feel more comfortable in that knowing the predictability of what should happen, even though if people don't know what will happen. But the notion that you have this entertainer, this person who, is not of the professional class, but also not even of the, the accepted or the anticipated class, is what is jarring people, right? That sense of uncertainty, that they just don't, they can't handle it.
Well, and even, if even Doug Ford, under the current circumstances, don't forget that New York Times thing I showed you, right? Mm-hmm. Where our leaders in general have a lot of goodwill. If even Doug Ford or other lesser leaders around the world who haven't done well, but who have risen to the, if even they can shine at this time, leadership has actually fallen, at least when it comes to political institutions. And they want to do something about it, maybe. I hope so.
Yeah. We're sort of hitting that 10 to it time frame, and I just want to ask if anybody else has any other questions of Bob. You've handled a number of them that was really well put. If not, Bob, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to share your thoughts and perspectives with us. Happy if you want to send us over the deck that you didn't get to be able to share with this group. We're gonna do some post-production on this and then share it with the rest of our MCM group and then make it public next week. So look forward to being able to share more of it as well. So thank you again. And I look forward to once again having a drink maybe in the West End or the East End or downtown at some point, or maybe, who knows, you can come out to Kitchener.
Well, it's been known to happen. So thank you, Terry, and all. I'm going to send you a link for the presentation. Feel free. And if any of you, I have a vast catalog and archive of studies, background. Or if you want to know who's who in certain areas of leadership comms, happy if any of you are interested in this area to connect with you and, take the time to provide you with anything that you may need or be looking for. I also just want to take this last opportunity, Terry. I'm relaunching Signal in September. My partner in previous years has been Nanos.
Right.
And now we're going to reform the company, and I'm attracting talent and treasure right now, and we'll be unfurling a new banner soon. So
excellent. If
this interests in any of your stakeholders, right from interns to anyone who wants to connect with us in any way, let me know. Happy to collaborate.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. All the best.
You all. Thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye. Now. Thanks, Terry.